Hello, Mr. Hardy here, and in this video I would like to teach you about the poem Colonisation in Reverse by Louise Bennett. So first we'll start by reading Colonisation in Reverse by Bennett. We'll then go through it stanza by stanza to check we understand what is going on. We'll then explore the poem's key message and areas of conflict. We'll then go through the poem one more time, identifying key linguistic, structural and poetic devices you may wish to memorise and pick out in an exam. And speaking of exams, I'll finally leave you with an exam-style question you can answer at the end if you wish to practice. So firstly, who is our poet Louise Bennett? Well, Bennett was born in 1919 and she died in 2006. She was more commonly known as Miss Lou. She was a Jamaican poet, but not only that, she was a media icon. She had influence over the radio and I think in television too. In 1974, she was awarded the Order of Jamaica. In Britain, we have like a MBE or OBE. Some people call it a knighthood. And then later in 2001 she was given an Order of Merit. Basically she was publicly recognised by the government as someone who's made significant contributions to Jamaica, in her case through literature and media. Bennett championed what's called Jamaican patois. So the official language of Jamaica is Jamaican English. Patois is, I guess, more the conversational or local dialect that is spoken there. Some linguists, so people who study languages, might call it Creole. Creole, patois, I think are the same thing. And some people look down upon patois as maybe being a less intelligent language. However, Bennett really championed it, saying it was part of Jamaican identity and culture, and she really encouraged its use. And this poem actually is written in what you would call Jamaican English or patois or Creole. Speaking of this poem, it was written in 1966, which is 4 years after Jamaica gained its independence from Britain. So during the British Empire, Jamaica was a colony. I think Britain had influence and rule over Jamaica for about 300 years. But you may have to check with your history teacher on that one. And then in 1962, Britain gave its independence back to Jamaica, and this poem was written 4 years after that. So the poem's called Colonisation in Reverse. I'm pretty sure most students know what the words in and reverse mean, but maybe not colonisation. So let's quickly cover that before we move on to the poem. Colonisation, to put it really simply, is when a country and its people, you can refer to them as the colonisers, gain control over another country and its people. You can refer to these people as the natives or maybe the colony. So as I mentioned earlier, during the British Empire, Britain was a coloniser and it controlled Jamaica, which was the colony or the natives that Britain controlled. Reverse colonisation is that when Britain gave Jamaica back its independence, Jamaicans decided to come and live in Britain, more specifically England. So reverse colonisation was when the colonised natives moved to the coloniser's country. In this case, Jamaicans moved from Jamaica to England. So I'm going to read the poem to you. I'm going to try not to put on a Jamaican patois Creole accent, but it's really hard because it's written quite phonetically. So the spellings, it sort of gives that Jamaican accent sound. But I'll try to read it as naturally as I can. Colonisation in Reverse by Louise Bennett. What a joyful news, Miss Matty. I feel like me heart gwin burst. Jamaica people colonising, England in reverse. By the hundred, by the thousand, from country and from town, by the shipload, by the plane load, Jamaica is England bound. Them a pour out to Jamaica, everybody future plan, is forget a big time job and settle in the motherland. What an island, what a people, man and woman, old and young, just a pack them bag and baggage and turn history upside down. Some people don't like travel, but for show them loyalty, them all a open up cheap fare to England agency. and week by week them shipping off, them countryman like fire, for immigrate and populate the seat of the empire. Oh no, see how life is funny. Oh no, see the turnabout. Jamaica live for box bread out of English people mount. For when them catch in England and start play them different role, some will settle down to work and some will settle for the dole. Jane say the dole is not too bad because they're paying she £2 a week for seek a job that suit her dignity. Me say Jane will never find work at the rate how she'd a look, for all day she stay pon Aunt Fan's couch and read love story book. What a devilment, England, them face war and brave the worse, but me wondering how them gwan stand colonizing in reverse. So I'm sure the first thing you notice is it's not written in standard English, it's written in Jamaican English, which can be called patois or Creole. I'm going to go through it stanza by stanza, and I'm going to explain what is happening in each stanza. So in stanza 1, the persona, the voice of the poem, who I assume is Louise Bennett, is talking to Miss Matty. Now it's not clear who Miss Matty is, but I assume it's maybe a friend or family member. And the persona is talking joyfully because Jamaica is colonising England. Put yourself in the shoes of a Jamaican person. Your country has been controlled and colonised for years and years and years. You now finally have your freedom and you get to go and kind of take revenge, as it were. Go to England and colonise England in your own way. So there's hundreds and thousands of Jamaicans from rural and urban areas all around Jamaica. They're going to England on planes and ships. In stanza 3, the Jamaicans' plan is to arrive in England, make loads of money, and then settle down. It says settle down in the motherland. There's a bit of confusion here for me. So motherland and fatherland usually is your country of origin, your country of birth. So this may suggest that Jamaicans will go to England, make loads of English money, so British pound sterling, and then return to Jamaica rich and settle down in Jamaica. Or it may mean they will move to England, make loads of money, and settle down in England. I personally think it's this second option of settling down in England, because that would be colonisation in reverse. Because when the British went to Jamaica, they didn't just take the Jamaicans' resources and leave. They stayed there for 300 years, for generations and generations. So if I had to guess, I would say that they're going to settle down in England and bring over Jamaican culture and food and maybe even this patois Creole language to influence England for generations and generations, years and years. Stanza 4. Jamaicans initially like England, and so many Jamaicans have migrated. Stanza 5. Some Jamaicans don't like to travel, they love living on their island, so instead they remain in Jamaica. But to help the cause, the reverse colonisation cause, they open up travel agencies that help Jamaicans who do like travelling to get to England. In the next stanza, we learn that every week more and more Jamaicans leave for England, and they are really determined to live specifically in England, which is the seat of the empire, kind of like the throne room of the British Empire. They want to get into the crown room, into the royal place, into England. Reverse colonisation is quite ironic because for years Britain exploited Jamaica for its resources and its people, and we used it to sort of fund and help the empire function. But now Jamaicans moving to England can sort of exploit the English system, for example the economic system to make more money, and even the benefit system to make money whilst they are settling in, looking for jobs, maybe not even intending to work at all. We learn that in the next stanza, some Jamaicans will get to England and find work straight away because the British pound is so strong they could make lots of money and this excites them. Whereas other Jamaicans are quite happy living off the dole. Now, for those of you who don't know, the dole is sort of like the casual name for the British benefit system. So if you cannot find work, for example, because of a disability, or you're currently unemployed, or maybe you've recently had a child, the government, instead of letting you starve and go hungry, will give you benefits, will give you some money to support you. However, for some Jamaicans, they come to England, they have no intention of working, they just want to live off the dole. We're then introduced to Jane, and Jane is a Jamaican who is already living in England. We assume Jane is a friend or family member of Miss Matty and the persona, who is Bennett, or at least I think it's Bennett. And Jane explains the dole system. She explains how she gets £2 a week, which doesn't sound like much, but I think back in the 60s it might be worth about 50 quid, I'm not 100% sure, which again doesn't sound a lot, but I think back then you could have survived comfortably, maybe not luxuriously, but comfortably on 50 quid a week. In the next stanza, the persona, which I believe is Bennett, doesn't think that Jane will ever find a job because all she does is read books on her aunt's couch all day. We get to the final stanza, stanza 11, and the poet, so Bennett, is wondering how England will deal with reverse colonisation. England is, and Britain is a remarkable country. We're a very small island, but yet we had a massive empire. We've won world wars. We're quite a resilient and good people. However, how will we deal with other people coming into our country, bringing their culture, bringing their language, their food? Historically, we maybe haven't been as good at this, and this is what Bennett is wondering. So I've actually got the poem out for a third time, and this time I've translated the Jamaican English, sometimes called patois or Creole, into what would be called standard English, the English that we would use in schools in Britain. So I'm going to read the poem one more time with the English, standard English translation, which might help you understand the poem a bit better. What joyful news, Miss Matty, I feel like my heart will burst. Jamaicans are colonising England in reverse. By the hundreds and the thousands from rural and Kingston ground, by the shiploads and the plane loads, Jamaica is England bound. Kingston is the capital of Jamaica. They are pouring from Jamaica. Everybody's future plan is to get a high-class job and settle in the motherland. What an island, what a people. Men and women, old and young, are packing up their bags and barrels and turning history upside down. Some people don't like to travel, but just to show their loyalty, they're opening their very own cheap fare to England agencies. Week by week, the volume of countrymen shipping out gets higher, all to populate and saturate the seat of the empire. Do you see how life is funny? Do you see the irony? Jamaicans are now the ones with English folks' money. Once they get to England, they settle in their different roles. Some will get right down to work, but some will settle for the dole. Jane says the dole is not too bad, because they pay her £2 a week to find a job that she's well suited for. I think Jane will never find work at the rate she claims to look, for all day long she sits on Aunt Fan's couch and reads her romance book. Again, it's not clear who Aunt Fan is, but I assume they're all friends or related somehow. What confusion and excitement in England. They've faced war and braved the worst, but I'm wondering how will they manage colonising in reverse. So that's a standard English translation, and please don't use that in your exam, because the copy in the OCR conflict anthology has that Jamaican English, that Creole, that patois. So if you're going to memorise quotes and use it in your exam, you need to memorise that version, the original version by Bennett. So, what is the poem's message? Well, Colonisation in Reverse by Bennett is a post-colonial poem, so it deals with the time after the empire. In this case, it was 4 years after Britain gave Jamaica their independence. And it explores this idea that Jamaicans are migrating to England after the British had colonised Jamaica for many years, gave them their freedom, and now the Jamaicans want to migrate to England. So where do we see conflict in this poem? After all, it's found in the conflict anthology. I think there's two types of conflict. I think there's the conflict of the original colonisation. So when Britain colonised Jamaica, I assume there was physical conflict, there was loss of life. Again, maybe check with your history teacher, who might know more than me. I think there was also maybe a lifestyle conflict, so British lifestyle, I assume, is different to Jamaican lifestyle. So there was a tension there. And Britain occupied Jamaica for 300 years. So there was entire people born into the colony and being occupied by Britain. And I'm sure that created a sense of resentment over time. But there also is a conflict of the reverse colonisation. So now Jamaicans are migrating to England. It's kind of like giving British people a taste of their own medicine. Having another people, another culture, another language, another food, another lifestyle, moving into your home country. Surely there's going to be some cultural conflicts. Surely there's some financial conflicts. For example, Jamaica maybe wasn't as financially strong as England, so Jamaicans moving to England would be a very sensible move, because even if they live on the dole, they might be doing better financially than if they stayed in Jamaica. So we have conflicts in the colonisation and in the act of the reverse colonisation, in my opinion. So, the techniques, you'll be glad to know, are fairly straightforward in this poem. It's the language that can be a bit difficult. So, first of all, we know it's written in Jamaican English. Sometimes it's called patois, sometimes it's called Creole. But if you look at those words patois and Creole, they're quite tricky to spell. So I always tell my students to just write Jamaican English if you want to identify the language of this poem. When it comes to the language, the most obvious things to spot are different word classes. There's interesting use of adjectives, verbs, nouns, adverbs, etc. We get some listing. It's not super obvious listing with commas in between the items on a list. It's sort of listing across a stanza. I'll point it out to you as we go through the poem. There's a simile. There's statistics, which is basically when you use a number in a fact. However, the statistics aren't represented numerically as sort of Arabic numbers. They are sort of written out in the stanzas, but they're still statistics nonetheless. This poem has 11 stanzas. There are 4 lines per stanza, and lines 2 and 4 per stanza rhyme. So I think it's safe to say this is a structured poem, and this probably reflects colonisation. When Britain colonised Jamaica, we brought over our law and order and systems, and we controlled Jamaica, which is probably represented in this controlled structure that Bennett employs. This is a post-colonial poem, so it means it deals with after colonisation, and actually in this post-colonial poem we see reverse colonisation. This poem is cyclical in the sense that the title is Colonisation in Reverse, and then the final line of the poem is Colonisation in Reverse, so it creates that cyclical structure. Poetically speaking, we have enjambment, which we know is when one line runs across many lines. We have caesura, which is when we have punctuation in the middle of the line. We have end stopping, punctuation at the end of the line. But most importantly for this poem, we have 2 or 3 different tones, different emotions and feelings in the poem, which might you can use to explore the poet's feelings and attitudes and these areas of conflict. So let's start with stanzas 1 and 2. What a joyful news. The adjective joyful reveals that Jamaicans are happy at the opportunity to migrate to England, to colonise in reverse. I've underlined Miss Matty. We don't know who she is, but we assume she's related or a friend of the persona, who I assume is Louise Bennett herself. I feel like me heart gwyn burst. That means I feel like my heart is going to burst, and that is an exaggeration. She is so happy she feels like her heart will explode inside of her. Hearts don't explode when you feel happy, so she's exaggerating how happy she feels at reverse colonisation. Burst and reverse rhyme, so you've got those in blue just to show. We have caesura after the word news to sort of highlight how joyful this colonisation in reverse is for the Jamaicans. And we have end stopping after Miss Matty, so we can ponder on her as a persona in the poem, as a character in the poem, and after England in reverse to end off that stanza. At stanza 2 we have statistics. Now we don't have hundreds and thousands into numbers. She's written it out using letters, but there's still statistics. And this is where we have a list, which isn't a super obvious list, because it's not like I'm going to the shop for eggs, milk, bread and butter. It's a list that sort of stretches across the stanza. 100, 1,000, country, town, shipload, plane load. These are listing the Jamaicans going over to England. There's hundreds of them, there's thousands of them. Some Jamaicans are from the country, some are from the towns and cities. Some go on the ships, some go on the planes. So this is listing to exaggerate and to show just how many Jamaicans are migrating over to England. Once again, town and bound rhyme, and the tone here is quite excited. They look forward to this adventure in England. And the little note at the bottom is to remind you that this English is called Jamaican English. You could call it patois or Creole. I personally think Jamaican English is the best one to use. So stanza 3, the verb pour makes Jamaicans sound like a liquid, like water. I don't know if you've ever spilt water or any kind of liquid, it sort of just spreads everywhere. This is sort of, I guess, a metaphor of how Jamaicans are going to spread in England when they arrive. Plan and land rhyme, so again identifying that rhyme scheme, and settle down in the motherland. So I explained this briefly earlier. Motherland and fatherland is normally your country of origin. So does this mean they're going to settle in Jamaica or England? You could argue both. I personally think they intend to settle in England and make England their new motherland for generations to come, because that would truly be colonising in reverse. What an island, what a people. In this stanza here, we have a lot of exclamation marks as our end stops. So this really shows excitement. Some of those exclamation marks are end stops. One of them is a caesura. Again, it's showing the excitement over coming to England. We get another list explaining the sorts of Jamaican people who have made the journey to England. Male Jamaicans, female Jamaicans, old Jamaicans, young Jamaicans. This is a list, again, to exaggerate and to exemplify just how many Jamaicans are keen to migrate to England to experience colonising in reverse. Moving on to stanzas 5 and 6. The tone here is quite humorous. So some Jamaicans migrate to England, but those who don't like to travel, they don't want to seem disloyal. They don't want to seem like they're letting Jamaica down by not migrating. So they set up an agency to help other Jamaicans migrate to England. It almost sounds like it's a game or a challenge Jamaicans have. How many Jamaicans can we send over to England? How many people can we use to colonise England? It gives it kind of like a humorous, a gamey, a challenge kind of tone. Them countrymen like fire. This is our simile here. This compares the Jamaicans to a fire. Now, in my head, this simile conjures an image of Jamaican men, women, and children being little flames, and maybe England and Britain being like a dry forest. When a flame or a spark ignites, even just one spark ignites a leaf in a forest, suddenly the whole forest can go ablaze. I think this kind of metaphorically suggests that when Jamaicans move to England, and they bring their culture, their food, their music, their fashion, their way of life, it will spread across England like a fire. And this is how Jamaicans are going to colonise England. When Britain colonised Jamaica, we use their resources, their people. When Jamaica colonises England, it's going to spread its culture to infiltrate all parts of British society. That's how I kind of interpret it in my head. The verbs immigrate and populate, I think, are very specifically chosen because these are the verbs you have to do if you want to colonise somewhere. When Britain colonised Jamaica, some people had to immigrate there, had to move to Jamaica, and then they had to bring their families with them and populate and make more children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so British rule could extend over Jamaica for many generations. So Jamaicans intend to do the same. They intend to immigrate over to England, and then the men and women will intend to procreate and have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and so the Jamaican population or infiltration of England will extend for many, many generations to come, colonising in reverse. Fire and empire rhyme, and empire there is a nod towards the British Empire, of which Jamaica was a colony for many, many years. Next couple of stanzas, the tone shifts towards a tone of irony. We get this with the first two lines about, oh no, see how life is funny, oh no, see the turnabout. Bennett is commenting on the irony of reverse colonisation, because now Jamaicans are making a living off of English people, whereas in the past, British people made immense amounts of wealth off of Jamaican people. I think Jamaica was a big exporter of things like sugar and rum and other sort of resources that Britain loaded on their ships and sort of traded around the world to make loads of money, to make Britain quite wealthy. Well, now it's ironic because Jamaicans, who maybe couldn't make much of a living in Jamaica, are moving to England, and they're tapping into the British economy to make loads of money. Some aren't even doing that. Some are just living off the dole because they can, off the benefit system, and they're taking British money for themselves. And this is sort of symbolised in the metaphor of bread being money. Jamaicans live off the bread box out of English people's mouths. You've got to imagine a Jamaican person physically stopping an English person from eating a sandwich, taking that bread out of the English person's mouth and putting it in their Jamaican mouths. They are moving to England and tapping into English resources to live off. Considering Britain did this to Jamaica for about 300 years, I personally don't have any grudge with Jamaicans coming over to England and tapping into the British economy or the British dole system. I think that's only fair, but you might have your own opinion on that. Moving on to the next stanza, we get this repetition of some, and the pronoun some sort of presents England as a land of opportunity. Some people can work if they want to and make loads of money, whereas some people will settle for the dole, the benefit system. They won't make lots of money, but they can effectively live for free. They're not really contributing to the British society, and yet they have enough money, £2 a week, to feed themselves, clothe themselves, and live. So we're introduced to Jane. Again, I don't know for certain who Jane is. I assume she's a friend or family member of the persona Bennett and of Miss Matty. And she gives statistics. Again, she doesn't use an Arabic number, a numerical number. She writes it out using English letters, but it's still a statistic nonetheless. I think I explained earlier, £2 a week back in the 60s would have roughly been 50 quid a week, which again doesn't sound a lot, but you've got to realise the cost of living was much cheaper then, so I think it was comfortable. It wasn't loads of money, but you could feed, clothe, house yourself for that, potentially. The words she and dignity rhyme, and I think dignity is a really interesting noun, because if dignity is sort of the self-respect you have, so if she can't find the job that she thinks matches her self-respect, then she can just live forever off the dole. So let's say there was a job available as a nurse, but she was saying, oh, I don't want to do that, it's a bit too disgusting dealing with human bodily fluids. Or maybe there was a job as a builder, but then she said, oh no, I don't want to do that and work hard all day in the sun. Or maybe there was a job as a teacher and she said, oh no, I don't want to do that, I don't want to work with children. She could basically turn down jobs that don't suit her dignity forever and live off the dole the rest of her life. Which it sounds like she wants to do, because we know that she reads romance books on Aunt Fan's couch. Again, I'm not certain who Aunt Fan is. I assume that Aunt Fan, Jane, Miss Matty, the persona, all know each other in some ways, either through family bonds or friendship bonds. And here the tone is very ironic. And I think this romance book, this love story book, is a metaphor. During the Empire, when British men had colonised an island such as Jamaica, they would then bring over their wives and children to do the populating part of immigrate and populate and continue the British rule over Jamaica. And these British women had a lot of money and didn't need to work. So one of the things they would do is, read books. So there's always a classic image of maybe an English woman in a dress reading a book, whilst around her there is maybe a sort of plantation of sorts with Jamaican workers working, and the British lady maybe generating a comfortable living and wealth off of that. Well, now that image is reversed. Now you've got English people who are working and paying their tax and contributing to the benefit system, also called the dole. And now you have Jamaican people who are actually sitting around all day doing nothing, reading romance books. Now, as a British person, do you get angry at that and say, how dare you come here and use our benefit system? Or do you say, well, actually, we kind of did it to you for years and years and years, so fair play that you're doing it to us in reverse? There's definitely a conflict there, a tension there, that you could explore when you explore this poem. Of course, look and book rhyme. Finally, stanza 11. What a devilment are England. The noun devilment's really interesting because obviously the first half of that word is devil, and the devil has connotations of evil. Is this Jamaican people saying that England is like the devil, some kind of evil influence on their life? I think you could stretch it like that. If you are stretching the meaning of words, let me go back a few slides to where it says, and turn history upside down. Down is phonetically in the Jamaican English spelt like dung. Dung is another name for poo or feces. Is this Bennett's way of saying not only turn history upside down, so this idea of Britain ruling over Jamaica, she wants to turn that upside down so that Jamaica can have rule over Britain, but is that maybe a suggestion that life under British rule was like dung, was like poo, like feces, was rubbish, was the S word? You could stretch that. I think you could argue that. Same at the end with devilment. Is it a stretch to say that life in Jamaica under British rule was like living under the devil? I mean, maybe. I wasn't there, I don't know. But it could be. History books suggest that it would have been tough. We have worse and we have reverse, which obviously rhyme. The tone at the end, there's a touch of humour. There's also a touch of genuine pondering and thinking. How is England going to deal with loads of Jamaicans moving in? Will there be a conflict of culture, a tension there, or will it work out okay? And by ending the very last line of the poem with colonising in reverse, which is a hint, which is a link back to the title, Colonisation in Reverse, Bennett has completed this cyclical structure about colonising in reverse. So, please make notes from this video on a physical copy of the poem, turn it into a revision guide of sorts so you can revise for your exams. And if you want to, you can answer this question. How does Bennett explore the duality of conflict in colonisation in reverse? Now, dual means two, so the double nature of conflict. The conflict of Britain having colonised Jamaica, and secondly, the conflict of Jamaica reverse colonising Britain. How are those two ideas explored in colonisation in reverse? I've given you a sort of essay structure you could use: introduction, looking at some language techniques, some structure techniques, some poetic techniques, and then the conclusion. If you want to follow that structure, you can. So if you found this video useful, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing to my channel so you can get all the OCR, conflict, poetry and analysis videos. And feel free to leave a comment, particularly if you have a different interpretation of a line, or you want to add something for me and other users of this video to read and know about. Well, thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.